Hello once again, my dear students, and welcome to another video about web applications development. This is the second part of the two-part series of video tutorials about user authentication using Laravel at the back end and NuxtJS and the front end. Let's get on with it. First of all, we are going to open up our command prompt to install our NuxtJS application. So I'm going to go to my web folder, and inside of here, of course, you're going to need the npm installed on your machine. And once you have that, you can execute the command npx create nuxt app, and you give it a name. I'll just call this auth demo. And it's going to download all the repositories and dependencies needed by a new Nuxt application. Now it's going to ask for some few things. The name, I'll use that, auth demo. I'll use JavaScript and npm. I'll use Bootstrap View. I'll use Axios, of course. I won't be using any linting, and I won't be using any testing, and I'll be doing just a single page application. And my server is a static. I'll use jsconfig because I'll be using VS Code. And now it's going to install into our directory all the files needed. Alright, and now we'll open up that folder that was auth demo and open up the code editor, and so we're now ready to go. First of all, let's build all our pages. So inside of our pages, we have the index here that has the tutorial somewhere. And I won't be using all these components. I'll first of all delete this, and then the index, I won't be using this one. Instead, we'll be creating a component for our navbar. So I'll call this navbar.view. And let me just copy in some code so that we can save a lot of time. And I'll just explain to you what it's going to be. So here's our navbar. And we only have here 4 links: the dashboard, logout, and register, as well as login. And when we click on the logout, we cover we call on a method called onLogout. All right, and when that happens, we just execute this method here on logout, which does not have anything yet. But for the rest, you have the dashboard, the register, and the login, which are just links to our pages, which we don't have yet in our pages folder. So I'll save that. And inside of our index here, we'll just add the navbar. Okay, and we'll also just have an h1. This is just called this a welcome page inside of a container. And have an h1. We'll say welcome, and I don't know what's wrong with this. Oh, okay, it should be inside of a div. Okay, let's also just add a margin top for our welcome, and let's try running this program out. Npm run dev. And of course, we'll open up our browser and go to localhost 3000. we actually have this error because I already have this code in here calling auth when in fact we are not yet we have not yet installed the auth package. So let me just remove this for now and put it back later on when we have that. And we should see our welcome page right there and our links. Let's also scaffold now our other pages. So you have the login page. So we say login.view. And again, to save time, we'll just copy in some code. So we'll have this. This is just the template. And we have here a card, and inside of a form, when we submit this form, we call on login, which we don't have yet. And inside this form, we'll have some form groups and some input types. We have the email. This is bound to a creds object in our data. We still have to add that as well, and so as well as the password. So let's add here the script. And first of all, we'll define our data. And the data is going to have a creds, which is an object. And also, we're going to define our methods. And instead of this method, we're going to call an async. We're going to create an async method called on login, which we'll implement also later. So that's our login page. So let's try to see if we can go inside there. All right, there we go. And we'll also do our register field. We don't have a register page yet, so actually we don't need the register for this example. Anyway, so let's just ignore the register page for now. And what we do need is the dashboard, so that we have something to land on after logging in. So we have dashboard.view here. We'll have a template. So inside, again, we're going to have the nav bar. And then here, we'll have a container. We'll just have a dashboard. And inside of this dashboard, we'll just display our user information in a table. So we have table striped. And we'll just have a th for user. Just put this in one line because it's very short. So we'll have also the ID and then the email. So like that will be our dashboard. And then, yeah, so that's it. We can now go on with the process of login. Before we are able to do login, we need to install the package that we are going to use for managing our authentication, and that is the NuxtJS auth package. So we'll install that using npm, of course, and the command is npm install. And we also have this flag --save exact, and the name of the package is at NuxtJS /auth-next. Okay, so that's the package we need to install. So this Nuxt auth package is a very powerful package that has a lot of things that it does in the background. A lot of the heavy lifting in terms of your programming, of the behavior of your application that is in respect with authentication is already covered in the Nuxt auth package. All you have to do is to configure some things. The configuration is also not that bad. There's also a That's this. There's also a great documentation about this. You just go to the web right here and ask for NuxtAuth, and you'll be directed to this page here, and it contains all the necessary information. So here you'll find the installation, this one, remember that, and also other things. So just visit them if you have some questions after this video. So now that we've installed the NuxtJS package, the auth package, what we can do next is to go to our configuration. It's in nux.config.js, and first thing is we add that to our modules here. We add at nuxjs/auth-next, and then we're gonna configure the auth module right here. We'll have the auth property for our configuration right here. Now the auth package allows us within a Nuxt application to use several types of login. So if you go back to the documentation, we have the option of using auth0, OAuth, Discord, Facebook, GitHub, Google, Laravel, JWT, Passport, and Sanctum. For this purpose, you can also do OAuth, but we are going to use local way, because in our backend we're just using the simple JWT package, JWT authentication using token. We'll be using the local here, and you can find all the necessary things you need to know right here in the documentation for that. So going back here in our configurations and the auth, we are going to define the strategies, config, and here we can identify several strategies for our authentication, but in this example we'll only be using the local strategy. So we'll have here local, and then within the local strategy we're going to define some more configurations. One is the token, the user, and the endpoints. So let's start with the token. So our token configuration, we are going to configure what is the property name of the token. So remember, when we try to access our backend, when we try to log in, so you have here this login endpoint on our backend, and in the body I have here a proper user email and password. So when I send this, actually the server is not running yet. Let me start that server. So give me a little time to start the server. I think it's inside of demo backend. It's this one, yeah. So all right, so it's now running. So when we send, this is the data that is returned as a response. And so in our configuration, we're actually going to where's that? In our configuration here for our property, we're actually going to use this. This is the property name that holds the token. So this is the property name of the token. It's called access token, and that's what we put here in the property. Next is we'll make it the global to true, and the type of our token is a bearer, so we also define that here. So we have bearer. That's it for the token configuration. Next, we'll configure the user. Now in the user, we also need to pass in the property of the user. So again, this similar to the token, what is the property that is holding the user information? Now in our case, I have already here logged in. So let me copy this token up and try to access the user's information using this, and our bearer token is of course this new one. So when we receive the data, this is what we get. This is the user data. And as you can see, it's not inside of any property whatsoever. It just directly returns the user data without wrapping it inside of an object. So in that case, we cannot say user here because this means that the user information is inside of this user property. But in fact, in our case, it's not inside of any property. It is returned as the exact data as it is. So instead of using user here, the property for user data is just false. Remember, this is false because the returned data is the actual data itself and not inside of any property whatsoever. Next that we need to configure is the endpoints. And there are several endpoints we are going to configure: the login, the logout, and the user endpoints. So we simply are going to define what is the endpoint for these things. So for the login, we define the URL as http://localhost:8000/API/login, and we also need to define the method. So the method in this case is post. So this is actually saying similar to for the logout. So let me just copy this one up and change this to just logout. And then finally for our user, this is user, and instead of post, this is a get request. Alright, so that's the endpoint configuration. Finally, after our strategies, we are going to configure as well the redirect. Now, this redirect property here is a configuration of redirection processes for each authentication activity. For example, the first one, the login redirect, is of course the link towards the login page, the URL towards the login page. This means that whenever a user tries to access a protected route, any page that is protected by our authentication middleware, if it will simply redirect to the login page. Another is the logout. I'm going to use login still. Now the reason for this is this particular redirection it means that what page are you going to be redirected when you log out. So when you log out, I want what we're saying here is when the user logs out, I want it to be redirected to the login page directly. And finally, the home. In this case, we'll just redirect it to the dashboard. What this means is when the user successfully logs in, where will it be redirected? So that's the home. So when the user logs in successfully, it will be redirected to the dashboard immediately. Okay, so that's it for the configuration of the authentication package. And now we can move on to coding our login and logout. So we go back to our login page right here, and under the methods, we now have an onLogin function, which is called when we submit this form that contains our email and password. And this email and password is bounded to the creds data. Okay, so here all we have to do is do an await and call this, instead of calling Axios here, which is the way to send request. We are no longer going to do that, but instead we are going to use the auth package instead. So this we are going to do auth dot and then log in with. Why is it login with? Because of the fact that the auth package of Nuxt allows us to log in using several strategies. In this example, we are only using the local strategy, but in reality, we can also implement other strategies as mentioned earlier, like OAuth or Laravel Sanctum and so on. So we can log in using several strategies, and that's why we are going to identify what strategy are we going to use when logging in. In this particular example, we're just using the local strategy. And finally, we pass in a data. And in this data, an object that contains a data. And this data should contain the credentials that has to be passed for the login to the login API. And the data we're going to pass is, of course, this creds property here that contains or that is bounded to our email and password. So here we simply say this dot creds. And then we can do the then. We get a response. Actually, here we don't have to do anything if the response is good, because the auth package is already doing that for you. So we can leave this blank here, but we do have to catch if there is an error right here. So maybe you can just give it an alert of invalid credentials for now. All right. So that's it for our login. That easy. And also, the auth package requires or uses the Vuex component, and Vuex is the state management. It's just the component that manages data storage, because a single page application is stateless and does not have data, does not store data on the application level. We have this Vuex, which is a state management that allows us to store data while the application is running. And this is where the auth package stores its data when you log in. And in order for it to activate, it's actually just this folder here, this store folder. All you have to do is right click and create a new file inside here called index.js. And that's all there is to it. The auth module is going to access that file and do something with it and be able to store data that it requires. And that data is going to be the user information of the logged in user. All right, and now we can now go back to our nav bar here and go back here. So we can now have some logic such that we will only display dashboard and log out if the user is authenticated, and we will only display register and login if the user is not authenticated. This is actually the code that I removed earlier because we have not installed the auth package yet. All we have to do is just say vif, and here we are going to access the auth module, the auth object, and that is the $auth, and there is a property called logged in. This is just a boolean value which indicates whether you are logged in or not. So if this is true, you are logged in, this will be displayed. And here we just simply say else, so that if this is not true, these are the ones that will be displayed. So if we go back to our browser and into our application, now we see we have the dashboard and the logout. Have we logged in already? I think we're already logged in. So let's implement the logout for now so that we can see the difference. The logout can be implemented right here in the navbar. It's right this one. This link, if we click on this link, we have to prevent it from doing its usual thing and instead call on this method called onLogout. So this is the one. All we have to do here is call this .auth.logout, and that's all there is to it. Again, the auth package or the auth module will do the rest. And so let's go back to our browser and click on logout. And now we are logged out. Now the register and login is displayed, and we are redirected immediately into the login page. Again, let's log in. By the way, let's try wrong credentials, and it says invalid credentials. So let's use the correct one. And so we are back in here, and now we are only displaying the dashboard and the logout links. Also, let's now populate the information in this dashboard. We go back to the dashboard here, and inside we can now just ask for it through the auth.user, and inside of the .user we have the I think user, I'm not sure, let's see. No, it's name. Then here we'll have auth.user.email. Actually, this should be the user, the name, and this is the ID. And this one is the email. So we get that. All right. And we can still access the landing page. And when we log out, we are redirected immediately to the login screen or the login page. Our register is not implemented yet. Now, what if I'm logged out and I want to access the dashboard this way? So as you can see here, we have this error because in our dashboard, we tried to access ID on user, but in fact, auth user is null because we are not logged in. Okay, so, and the reason for this is even if I'm not logged in, I was able to access the dashboard page, even if I'm not logged in. The reason for that is because we did not make any protection. We did not protect any route with the authentication protection yet. Now, in terms of protection, in my opinion, in an application, most of the pages have to be protected by authentication, and only very few pages are not. See, for example, the about page, the welcome page, the login page, the register page. Those are the pages that does not require authentication. In fact, they are mostly for all users. Now, on the other hand, there are many other more pages that have to be protected. So, in my opinion, more pages needs protection, and only very few pages does not require protection. In that case, I would like to implement, in terms of protecting routes, I would like to implement to protect everything and then just define some exceptions. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So we go to our NuxtConfig.js, and somewhere here, maybe just above route, actually you can put this anywhere in this first level, is going to be the router configuration. And inside the router configuration, we add the middleware. And inside of the middleware is going to be an array of middlewares that you want to implement on the routes. But in this case, we're only going to implement the auth middleware. And what it does, it's going to protect all the pages now. So all the pages are now protected. And if we are going to refresh this, we are in the dashboard, the dashboard is protected. And so that is why we are redirected immediately to the login page. If we go to the register, there's no register page. I forgot about that. Let's add a blank register page just for this purpose. So create a new file, register.view. Okay, we'll have a template, and I'll just add here user registration. Of course, we're not going to complete this one here. So we get our registration. And we are redirected back to the login page, because again, all the pages are protected. Even if we go to the slash, we still are going to be redirected to the login page. So now we are protected. If we log in, we are redirected to the home page, because this is where we last tried to visit. So that's another thing that is also part of the auth package behavioral programming within it. Since I attempted to open the home page and I was redirected to the login page because I was not logged in, and the home page is protected by the auth package or the auth middleware. When I logged in, it knows that I was trying to access that, and so I was redirected back there. If I hadn't accessed anything else and I logged in, like for example, I log out now and then I log in, you see I'm redirected to the dashboard. So the default, the redirect is the dashboard, but if you try to access a protected route without logging in, the next time you log in, you'll be redirected to that protected route. Now, again, we now are able to access the dashboard. We are able to access the this page, this landing page, and we can also access the register page right there. Everything is protected, but we are now able to access because we are logged in. However, we don't want that our landing page and our register page are protected, because you want it to be accessed by our guest users. So what we can do is give them exemptions, and that's very simple to do. We simply get inside of the page component, and inside of the script we simply add the auth config here and give it a false. It means it's not included in the authentication middleware. As well, we'll do that to the register here. So we have a script, and here we have auth, and give it false. And now the register and the index pages are both unprotected or not protected by the authentication middleware. So now if we click on the home page, we are now able to access the welcome page even if I'm not logged in, as well as the registration page even if I'm not logged in. So we are, but when we log in as well, we now that I'm not logged in also, if I try to access the dashboard, I get redirected back to the login page. And if I log in again, I can access the dashboard. So that's all for our video here. That ends the two-part series of user authentication using Laravel as the back end and NuxtJS in the front end. I hope you have learned something from this tutorial, and I hope to see you again in the next videos of mine. Bye bye. Thank you, everyone.